Hi there, I'm Amanda, and I'm the Science and Stewardship Manager at Cascade Forest Conservancy. One of my roles here at CFC is running our Young Friends of the Forest program, where I take out middle and high school students to work on one of our conservation or restoration projects. Last year, over 200 students participated in either beaver habitat site assessments or helped us plant trees along riparian corridors. This spring, I was hoping to kick off a new project that would begin a long-term study on plant phenology and climate change. Students would learn about a variety of important plant species in the Gifford-Pinchot National Forest and document what phase in their life cycle the plant was in. For example, phases we would see in the spring would be budding or flowering. Documenting when these phases are occurring each year can help us to understand how certain plants are going to adapt to climate change. When I was getting started with this new program, I found a global citizen science project called Budburst that's run by the Chicago Botanical Garden. They have an online database where anyone can go and upload their phenological data about plants, and then researchers from all over the world have access to this data. I thought this would be a fun component to add to the Young Friends of the Forest project, so they could not only have hands-on experience collecting the data and knowing that it was going to be used by us for a study, but they also get to share that data with scientists all over. Seeing as how I have to cancel the Young Friends of the Forest trips this spring, I realized I could still share this lesson with all of you, and you can go out and collect data for scientists in your backyard or during a walk in your neighborhood. All you need is your eyes, a notepad and camera, and computer access, but if you're watching this video, you probably have that. So let's walk through the process, and then you can go outside and start exploring. Okay, so for the rest of the video, I'll be talking to you about what plant phenology even is and why we are interested in collecting that type of data. I'll give you an introduction to the Budburst website. We'll talk about the different types of observations you can make for Budburst. Then I'll go over entering an observation online to the global database, and then finally I'll recommend some plant ID books and even give you a few ideas for making your own plant ID book. First, I'll go over some terminology. So, phenology, pheno meaning to show or to appear, and ology being the study of. Phenology is the study of the timing of the biological events in plants and animals, such as flowering or leafing in plants, or hibernation and migration in animals, and reproduction in both plants and animals. Those observable stages in the plant or animal's life cycle are called phenophases, and all of those phenophases have a start and an end. A phenological trait is the directly observable quality that provides information about the plant or animal's phenology. So if I went outside right now and I went to look at a particular tree and it had flowers on it, then I would know it's in the flowering phenophase. I don't really know the length of that phase because I didn't see it start and I'm not seeing it end, but I know its current phenological trait. So we at CFC and those at Budburst and researchers using Budburst data and other phenological data are interested because we're expecting there to be a change in the timing of phenophases due to climate change. So we know that all plants and animals go through multiple phenophases during their annual life cycle, and that the timing of these phases are dependent on seasonal changes. So things like variations in day length, increasing or decreasing temperatures, and duration of rain or snowfall all have an effect on when a phenophase change occurs. So, as climate change, we expect that the normal timing of things to be a little disrupted. And that can be an issue. Something called an ecological mismatch will happen, and that's when a predator-prey relationship is interrupted by a change in the timing of life cycle events. A really basic example of that is when insects hatch early, so that when migrating birds arrive, those insects are already gone and there's nothing left for those birds to eat. That could cause a partial die-off in the bird population, and then that's going to have a negative effect on the predators that rely on the bird as a food resource. So there really is the potential for a ripple effect, even if only one species in the whole food web is affected by climate change. With the changing climate, some species will be able to adapt, but others will not. So studying the timing of phenophases in relation to the seasonal changes and climate changes, and learning what species will be affected will help researchers better understand the overall changes in the environment. In 2016, CFC published our Wildlife and Climate Resilience Guidebook, and that was an overview of potential impacts the GP could face in a changing climate. So that's kind of one of the reasons that we want to collect phenological data. It's because we want to start to observe those changes, and if there's a way for us to mitigate that with certain projects, then we definitely want to know. So that could come in the form of managing for invasive species, or just knowing what species are vulnerable, or what species populations or ecological communities are vulnerable to a change in the climate. So those are two things that were on this really great list of applications for phenology data that I found from the USA National Phenology Network. So they mentioned those two in relation to ecosystem management, but also, it's not just those plants and animals out there that are affected by these changes in life cycle events of plants and animals. Humans can be greatly affected by this. So we use an understanding of plant phenology to predict human health related events. So things like allergies, or when it's going to be mosquito season or another type of insect season. And we look to that knowledge that we have. So if that's changing, that's important for us to understand. Really important for farmers and the whole agricultural industry. They look to phenology to find those optimal times to plant and fertilize and harvest their crops. That's huge. If too many things start to change and their plants are negatively affected, that's going to have a huge ripple effect to the amount of food that we can get to humans all over the world. Understanding the timing of different ecosystem processes, such as carbon cycling. So with the changes in life cycle events, that means the changing of the timing of photosynthesis, respiration, and transpiration in a terrestrial ecosystem. This is still very heavily being studied, and it's not quite understood what the effects are on those kind of processes. So collecting more data is only going to help us get to a better understanding. So let's circle back around to Budburst and why there's this global database, and why CFC is interested in collecting this type of data, and why I'm trying to get you to do it while you're at home. Collecting phenological data is not a new thing. This is something naturalists, gardeners, fishermen, and others just passionate about the natural world have been collecting for over hundreds of years, dating back to the 1700s in Carl Linnaeus' time, where he was just going and exploring and basically writing down any and all kinds of observations. And there was plenty of people out there like him. So that's really allowed for researchers to form a better understanding of how the timing of plant-animal phenology has changed over the past few hundred years. And analyzing this historical data, they've really found that these changes in these life cycle events is one of the most sensitive indicators of the local effects of global climate change. So continuing to collect this data is hugely important for keeping this kind of research going. So by going in your backyard and collecting data, you're helping scientists predict changes that may come in the years and decades ahead, which will ultimately help all of us understand and respond and be prepared for our changing climate. Okay, so now that we know that phenological data is important and researchers are going to put it to good use, let's learn more about the global data set that is Budburst. So we'll head over to budburst.org. You'll first want to make an account. I've already done that, so I'm currently logged in, and I want to direct your attention to the tabs over to the left. And we'll head to the Plants tab first. So basically, all Budburst wants people to do is to observe the different phenophases of plants. leafing, flowering, fruiting, when leaves start to change color, and then when leaves fall. They have a list of 390 species that researchers are most interested in, but they will accept data on any plant species. I'd say deciding on the plants that you want to observe is definitely the hardest part. So there's multiple approaches that you can take when coming up with this list. So the thing that I did is that I saw that you could organize this list by state. So seeing as how I'm in Oregon, I want to look up the Oregon plants. So that makes the list smaller, so it's not as intimidating. And I went through and just looked to see if I recognize any plants that I might be seeing around my house or neighborhood. And right off the bat, I recognized 6. So short list, but it got me started. You could also start outside first and go and explore and then make a list of what you see and what you're able to identify out there, and then come back and check to see if they're on the website. But again, it's totally fine if they're not, and maybe down the line it just so happens so that species that wasn't on the list ends up being an important indicator of climate change, and you've already helped contribute to that data set. So another thing you could do is just make a list of plants based off plants that you know and like, or plants that are on the website. And these are ones that you want to ideally observe, but you don't know if they're out there, but then that kind of makes it like a scavenger hunt. So when you're going out for a walk, you can just make sure to keep your eyes peeled for those plants of interest. So there's 2 types of observations you can make on your plants of interest. The first being a one-time observation and the other being a life cycle observation. So for the one-time observation, that's just going to be you going out, looking at the plant, and saying what phenophase it's currently in. So you're looking at that phenological trait to determine what is being exhibited by that plant at that point in time. So if I went out and I saw that there was a yellow head of flowers on a dandelion, that is of course in the flowering stage. And if I went out and I saw the head of seeds, I would know it's in the fruiting stage. They're going to ask a little more detail, and I'll explain that in just a second, but we'll go over the life cycle observation next. So this one's a little more detailed and definitely takes more of a commitment, but seeing as how we are at home right now, this is actually a great observation that you can make that you might not normally make because our schedules are too busy. So this involves going and monitoring the plant every day. So you're trying to catch the exact timing of when the plant goes from one phenophase to another. So a little example here is that you start going out checking on your dandelion on Sunday, you're checking on it every day and it's in the flowering phase, and then all of a sudden you go out on Thursday and that seed head is formed. So then you know that Thursday, whatever that date is, that's going to be when it changed from flowering to fruiting. And so that definitely gives researchers a lot more data than just that one-time observation. So this is an ideal data collection that you can do for researchers, because it's really hard for anyone to go out and just sit and watch plants for who knows how long to witness these changes. So this would be a great contribution to the scientific world if you're able to do the life cycle observations. So here are some data sheets that you can print off if you have a printer available. If not, you could always just have them pulled up on your computer or some other device, or you could just write down on a piece of paper what you're looking for. But I really like using these because it gives you a definition of timings within a certain phenophase. So for each of these, it has an early, middle, and late stage. So that gives the researchers a little more information than it just being, say, in the flowering stage. So that is defined for you on those sheets, so those are definitely nice to have with you. You can see here on the life cycle report, you'll definitely hold on to this sheet for a while because they're wanting you to capture the dates of all of these different phenophases, even all the way into the changing of leaves and leaves falling. So again, great if you can be committed to watching your plant through a couple of seasons. You'll definitely get some exciting data if you choose to do that. Now we'll head back to the Budburst website to learn how to enter an observation to get it in their online database. So there's the Observations tab to the right, and then there's a New. I'll be entering a one-time observation that I made last week. I was on my daily walk and I came across some yarrow. I had remembered seeing that on the list, so I took some photos, which I'll be uploading right here. So that's the first thing they ask for. You can have up to 5, and they ask for at least 2. There will be people checking your ID. So if you're maybe unsure, then you can upload more photos, and that'll definitely help. Then it asked what plant, like I said, common yarrow. I'll put that there. It has my location from the photos. Name of location, I'll just say it's neighborhood, as opposed to maybe if I was going out to the forest to collect this data, then just for myself would keep things organized. You can make a nickname. I'll leave that blank. I'd want to come up with something really creative, and can't right now. Let's see, I believe it was last Thursday. There we go. And the phenophases that they care about for yarrow are just the flowering and fruiting. So you'll notice, depending on the plant, they'll be looking for certain phenophases. So for yarrow, it's a perennial plant, so the leafing isn't happening on an annual cycle, but the flowering and fruits are. So that's what they care about for yarrow. There were no flowers and there was no fruit at this time. I wondered if that was typical, so I went to the common yarrow page on the Budburst website and scrolled down, and I saw that bloom time was May to September. So that was neat to find out that what I observed is pretty typical. Lastly, it just has a notes section if you want to input any other piece of information that you might think would be of interest to the researchers. The life cycle observation is really similar, and again, if you use the sheet, you're going to have all the data and you're just going to input it along with your photos and press submit. And it instantly gets added to the database. You can go up to data, search, and I can see the most recent one is a one-time observation last week on April 10th for the common yarrow. Here are my recommendations for plant IDing guides. We have a few books here. The Pacific Coast Tree Finder. This is a dichotomous key, so it lays out different characteristics of leaves and barks and helps you get to the correct identification of Pacific Coast trees. Plants of the Pacific Northwest Coast by Pojar and McKinnon is one of my favorite field guides, and it has everything in there. It even has an oddball section that is very interesting. The Trees and Shrubs of the Pacific Northwest just has really great, vivid photos that I find help with IDing quite a bit. So of course you could order these books right now if you'd like, or there's plenty of online resources out there. And my favorite one for Washington plants is the Burke Herbarium Image Collection, so you can just Google that and find it. And for Oregon, the USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service has a multitude of field guides from grasses to trees that are really helpful. There's also the app LeafSnap that you go and take a photo of a leaf and it helps you identify that plant. It doesn't work all the time, but I've actually had pretty good success, and so it's not the worst thing to use by far. Another thing that I thought that might be fun is creating your own plant ID book. So you're going to be taking pictures of the plants that you find, so you could print those out and make your own little ID book of, plants of your neighborhood. Or what I did, because I don't have access to a printer, One thing I did is I painted some features. This is a Doug fir, so I painted its cone, the needles, and the shape of the tree. And I plan on doing this with a few other species I have in my backyard, and just doing a little bind and then having this cute little booklet for my backyard trees. Another thing you could do, which I only advise doing this if it's plants in your backyard. Don't pick plants out of other people's yards, but this is a purple dead nettle that I found in my backyard. There's plenty of this back there. So I took a sample and then I pressed it and then taped it to the sheet of paper and then added my little facts at the bottom. So to press plants, super easy. Collect a sample and then you can just fold it up in parchment paper and find some heavy books to put it in. You'll want to change out the paper every couple of days because there's obviously going to be moisture in the plant, and so that'll make it wet and it won't allow it to dry out as quickly. So if you're going to press, just make sure to change out that parchment paper, and then I'd say in 5 to 7 days you have a nicely pressed specimen. So then you can just glue it or tape it onto a little piece of paper and bind these together, and again you have your own little personal plant ID book. Thanks for watching the video. CFC is hard at work at home planning this year's conservation and restoration projects. We are unsure when we can make it back out into the field, but we are very excited for all of this year's projects and being able to get volunteers out in the forest with us. If you're interested in checking out our trips we have planned later in the year, head to the link on the screen and check out those projects. In the meantime, we hope this video inspires you to do some science at home. Hope to see you in the field soon.